The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. Today, we are announcing a landmark lawsuit just filed by Children's Health Defense in our EMR and Wireless Harms Department. The FCC is ignoring a court order for years and continuing to expand wireless infrastructure while violating a court order that CHD was critical in making to happen in the first place. Today, I have on attorney Scott McCollough, who heads the litigation efforts at Children's Health Defense for EMR issues, as well as Risa Evans, an attorney in our EMR department, to discuss the history of this, what's going on, what just happened yesterday with this new lawsuit. Also, emergency, there is an Ebola outbreak that Dr. Meryl Nass is going to be educating us on. Is this very serious? Is it not serious? What needs to happen? There's nobody I trust more than Dr. Meryl Nass to go over that. So stay tuned, stay with us for this entire hour. It's going to be a good one, as always, as it always is. But first, as we always do, we're going to go into the news. Today is a very unique day in America because the most expensive primary in American history is happening today. We have Thomas Massie, a sitting congressional representative from Kentucky, being challenged by Ed Galrine. We have seen an unbelievable event in Kentucky where thousands of people across the nation are going to Kentucky for this primary. Now, Children's Health Defense does not support nor oppose any political candidate or political party, but we do support medical freedom and all of those who support medical freedom. Many people know that Thomas Massie was one of the few people who demanded accountability when COVID first happened. We also know that he sponsors End the PrEP Act, a bill Children's Health Defense supports to end the PrEP Act that gives blanket immunity to countermeasures. So, God bless Thomas Massie. I say personally for myself, I'm saying a prayer for you no matter what happens, brother. Amazing thing. You've done amazing things. You're going to continue to do amazing things for sure. Everyone in Kentucky, get out there and vote and do what you think is right. Nobody saw that this was going to be this type of moment that it ended up being for the nation. So it's rare that we get this. So as a nation, we should pay attention to what happens. Rand Paul just put out a tweet that caught my attention. Check this one out. My bills to address COVID-related issues. 1, Risky Research Review Act, dealing with overseeing gain-of-function research. 2, Royalty Transparency Act. Dr. Fauci never said under oath who got money from Big Pharma on his team. And 3, End the Vaccine Carve-Out to remove Big Pharma's liability immunity for injuries. Another Kentucky representative, Rand Paul, being in Kentucky, being the senator there, being in charge of the Homeland Security Committee recently. A lot of you know there was this blockbuster testimony in his committee from whistleblower CIA officer Jim Erdman. We've covered that a lot. I am from New York. I've lived in New York City for almost 2 decades, moved out not too long ago. But last week I was back in New York City in the Bronx because the Bronx senator there for state senator, Gustavo Rivera, is the head of the health committee, the Senate Health Committee. And he is sitting on top of 4 horrible vaccine-related bills that he had the power to move forward. Well, me and some of my close friends and a lot of Bronx residents of a very diverse background went to the Bronx in front of Gustavo Rivera's office to let him know what we thought about these bills. Let's show that clip.
No vaccine mandate. Everybody, we're in front of Gustavo Rivera's office. He is the senator who passed the bill and pushed forward a bill to ban unvaccinated kids from summer camps. He might require Hep B shots for adults to go to college. He might require an adult vaccine database that ICE could use to arrest undocumented immigrants. Gustavo Rivera, no vaccine mandates! My body, my choice. My body, my choice. Your body, your choice. My kids, my choice. My kids, my choice. Your body, your choice. Your body, your choice. No vaccine mandates. No vaccine mandates. No vaccine mandates. No vaccine mandates.
Hands off the children.
Hands off our kids. We don't co-parent with the government. Okay, Senator Rivera has no children. He wants to tell us how we should manage our children. It's not fair. It's not right.
Shout out to Children's Health Defense for providing that digital truck with those amazing images on it. Dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of people stopped and were talking about it, asking us questions. One thing that's interesting is they want a mandatory adult vaccine database. Gustavo's district is extremely diverse, with many people from all over the world, especially Latin America. That database can easily be used by ICE to target people. We found a Bronx resident of Hispanic origin that had something to say about that. Let's show that clip.
Tengan cuidado porque lo que decidan hoy afecta mañana y es un slippery slope lo que puedan hacer con nuestros cuerpos.
Atención, la Asamblea de Nueva York aprobó una ley que crea una base de datos obligatoria de vacunas para adultos. Esto podría usarse para atacar a las comunidades inmigrantes.
Gustavo Rivera quiere que nosotros nos registremos y es muy fácil para ICE encontrar nuestra gente, nuestros muchachos. Esto es peligroso.
El senador Rivera puede someter este proyecto de ley a votación. Ya aprobó una ley que prohíbe a los niños en todos los campamentos de verano que no están vacunados.
Este es mi niño. Yo rogué a Papá Dios por mis niños y esta es mi decisión. Si la vacuna trabajan para ustedes. No se preocupe de lo que yo decido. Esta es mi religión, este es mi muchacho y yo voto, yo trabajo y yo contribuyo a este país. Yo merezco decidir el futuro de la salud de mi muchacho.
Ayúdanos a decirle al senador Rivera: los padres deciden, no los políticos.
Why are they doing that? There's hundreds of camps that have no vaccine requirements. A lot of Christian and Jewish camps out there that don't have vaccine requirements. Does Gustavo Rivera hate religious people? Does Gustavo Rivera hate religious people? I don't know. Why don't you tell us, Gustavo? Why don't you tell us?
It was a great day out in the streets of the Bronx. People from all over New York State, from New York City, from the Bronx itself. Such a diverse background. None of the bad bills are moving forward currently. I think the effort we put out there was quite successful. And so thank you to everybody who's done that. Everybody in New York, pay attention from our action alerts that are coming. We have till June 4th. The session ends. The clock is ticking, and Albany still doesn't have a budget. 40 days late with their budget. That's good that they're delayed. They can't do bad vaccine stuff. They got to figure out the dollars and cents. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth every couple of days has another amazing announcement for warriors of conscience who refused the COVID shot. He has another one that we're going to play now of a soldier who had refused the COVID shot, who is now being brought back to his position. Let's show that clip.
Joe Biden's mandate to force military service members to take the COVID-19 vaccine was wrongfully and unlawfully applied because the Biden Pentagon refused to grant exemptions for certain medical and faith reasons, not to mention it was an experimental vaccine. As a result, many service members and their families suffered severe hardship, and the department lost trust with the American people. President Trump's executive order on this topic stated that the military unjustly discharged those who refused the vaccine, regardless of their conscience or the years of service given to our nation. He called this what it is, an unfair, overly broad, and completely unnecessary burden on our warriors. Under the leadership of President Trump, the War Department is committed to doing everything we can to make it right, as you know. We want warriors of conscience, warriors who made a principled stand for truth. We want them back in our ranks as soon as possible. We are welcoming back to serve as patriots who refused the COVID-19 vaccine and were discharged for that reason. If that is you, and you still have the desire to once again wear the cloth of our nation, we are ready to reinstate you with back pay and with benefits.
So there is another soldier who is recently reinstated with back pay and benefits. I'm curious what's going to come next from Secretary Hegseth. Thank you so much, Secretary Hegseth. You are doing many things that are unprecedented. Secretary Hegseth has ended a 70-year flu shot vaccine mandate for soldiers. I've been told it was a simple cost benefit analysis that led him to that decision. This wasn't benefiting the troops. It wasn't stopping transmission of the flu shot. It was causing people to leave. People who they spent millions of dollars to train were leaving. That cost benefit analysis held the day. No one has done this before. So my hat's off to Secretary Hegseth in this regard. There's a lot of great things that are happening there. And this is coming right before Duty to Disobey is about to be available streaming online, be available in theaters. And I have a special breaking news announcement today about Duty to Disobey. Today we are announcing for the first time in Washington, D.C., we are going to be holding CHD's first Advocacy Day on June 10th, where Senator Ron Johnson is hosting us. Rob Schneider is going to be a special guest to this as well, too. Our vaccine advocacy department, our EMR and wireless harms department is going to be presenting at the Capitol. All the details are going to be out later today. It says 9 a.m. to 3, but actually it's going to be 10 to 3 p.m. I pulled the trigger a little early. We're even still in the edit mode on this. But I want you to also know on Advocacy Day that evening, there's going to be a special viewing of Duty to Disobey in Washington, D.C., where Senator Johnson will be overseeing a roundtable discussion. Details on that are coming very, very soon. We don't have them right now. Because we're securing the space still. It will be in D.C. or just near the D.C. area. So mark June 10th off as a day to be in Washington, D.C. Okay, with that, I want to get into our main segment here about the new lawsuit from Children's Health Defense. Defender just ran a piece on this. Let's get that Defender headline up. Children's Health Defense seeks to force FCC to comply with 2021 ruling. And there's also an action alert that has been put out. It is going to be emailed out today. Stop unchecked cell tower expansion. We're going to need everybody's help. But first, we need to learn exactly what we need to do on this. So joining me now, we have attorney Scott McCollough and Risa Evans. Thank you both so much for joining me this morning.
Hey there, Lou.
Welcome.
Good morning, CHG.
So, Scott, let's start with you. Give us the history on this. On 2021, you led a historic victory. I remember when it happened, everybody I knew in the EMR community just went nuts over this, something that's never happened before, but we're still having problems with this. Give the history of what happened.
Sure, but I have to go back to way before 2021.
Okay.
What we're talking about here are the FCC's exposure limits for human exposures to radio frequency radiation. Those limits are based on the notion that radio frequency radiation can harm you only if it burns your skin. They were based on tests with a couple of rodents in the 80s where they exposed them until they overheated to the point that they stopped eating. The current versions were established in 1996, over 30 years ago. I want everybody to go back and think about what our wireless environment was like then. We barely had cell phone service. We didn't have Wi-Fi routers. We didn't have all of these towers sitting behind us. We were served by very, very tall towers that were often 15 to 20 miles away from people. So the situation has changed a lot. The technology has changed a lot. The deployment techniques have changed a lot. The usage patterns have changed a lot. Certainly back then, nobody could have imagined that we'd have children looking at screens this close to their face with Bluetooth earbuds for 4 to 6 hours a day. These standards are over 30 years old. In 2013, the commission said, maybe we need to take a look at this. And so it issued what they called a notice of inquiry and asked folks whether they should change the rules. In 2019, it decided, nah, we're going to keep them the way they are. So soon thereafter, Children's Health Defense and several others, including Environmental Health Trust, took a case. It ended up in the DC Circuit. And the court in 2021 ruled that the commission had failed to adequately explain why maintaining the 1996 rules was reasonable in light of all of the health and environmental science before it. That was in 2021. 4 years later, the commission has done nothing. And, I want everybody again to think about what our environment is like now. You cannot go anywhere without being involuntarily exposed. Under the current legal regime, if you are harmed by wireless exposure, even including involuntary, you cannot file a lawsuit and get damages. You cannot seek relief under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You cannot even file a complaint at the FCC and say, I was exposed involuntarily and I was harmed. The commission doesn't have a means to process complaints that these regulated industries are actually following the rules. The problem here is the rules. So what is to be done? Well, after a reasonable time, we've given the commission many, many opportunities here. We and others have filed many requests that the commission deal with this problem. And before it really acts on several other recent proposals to even greater expand wireless deployment, we have now turned back to the court and said, court, you need to tell the commission you meant what you said. They have to provide a reasoned explanation. I'll turn this now over to Risa, who can explain a little bit more about what's in the petition and what we're asking for.
Sure. So I just want to emphasize one point in connection with what Scott just said, which is, basically we are all currently held hostage to the FCC's exposure limits because there's wireless infrastructure everywhere, and even people who try to avoid exposure to RF radiation find it incredibly difficult. Our kids are bathed in it at schools during the day, and so these exposure limits affect every single one of us all the time, whether we know it or not, and whether we consent to that or not. So in this petition, we are asking the court to order the FCC to do what the court already ordered the FCC to do in 2021, which is to take a reasoned and really well-considered look at all of the science that was before the FCC that suggests quite strongly that, that exposure to RF radiation at the 1996 limits harms people, it harms the environment, and the FCC really needs to do something about that. So in the petition, we pointed out that in the years since the 2021 order was issued, instead of complying with the order and seeking to enhance safety, what the FCC has done is sought to accelerate wireless build out by trying to even further eliminate state and local control over wireless facility placement. We also pointed out to the court that during this time, the harms from RF radiation have continued to both people and to the environment, especially because, as Scott pointed out, the the number of wireless facilities and the use of wireless devices since even 2021 has just increased almost exponentially. So it's very clear that the 1996 limits just take no account of this. We think that because on petitions of this sort, courts are more apt to order an agency to act when human health and welfare are at stake, that this was an opportune moment to ask the court to order the FCC again to do what it should have been doing for the last 4.5 years. It's even more than 4.5 years since the order was issued.
So I want to draw attention to something that I had the honor and privilege to be involved with your department. Just a month ago or so, Congress sought to put forward HR 2289. And what that would have done is just completely and totally ended just about any local oversight involved in placement of cell towers and wireless radiation. When that bill was seeking to move forward, it was announced on a Friday. It was put into a committee on a Monday. It didn't even make it into committee because of the outpouring of calls and emails because of those in our activist movement who are against this and push this forward. So I think the concern now is that, okay, that's good. It doesn't look like Congress is moving forward, but now the FCC might move forward with something similar, which won't be statutory, but will be rulemaking. Why don't you talk to us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me jump in, and I'm going to relate to two things. First of all, let me emphasize that House Bill 2289 went exactly the wrong direction. It took power away from local communities. The people who are affected no longer would have a voice in where things like the cell tower behind me are placed, oftentimes right next to their property line. It would have also locked in the FCC rules. One of the provisions in that bill said that the FCC rules are binding on the court. So it would have taken away everybody's rights. Now, what we think is, first of all, Congress could actually solve this problem. Congress could do the right thing and eliminate the 1996 Act under which the FCC is acting here. It could tell the FCC to actually allow for local choice and to honor health freedom. And so we do urge people to write their elected representatives and urge them to do the right things. Don't go the way that HR 2289 did. Instead, go the other way and represent the people rather than the telecommunications industry. The FCC does think that now the onus is on it to carry out the telecom industry's agenda. And there are rumors that it was gearing up to go ahead and issue some of these rules that would have wiped out all local control and even exempt wireless facilities from environmental evaluation under the National Environmental Policy Act. And we urge people to also contact the FCC and tell them not to do this. Instead, what the commission needs to do is carry out the mandate of the court in 2021. Before it moves forward with this wireless expansion, it's going to put this stuff every 750 feet against people's will, right in front of their yards, on top of schools. It needs to look at the environmental and health effects of this wireless radiation, because it is clear these rules were devised in a different era, under different technology, different usage patterns, and they used the wrong base of assumption. They just need to go back and start over.
So with that, everybody should be taking action now. You should be completing the action alert that Children's Health Defense has just put out. Lou, if you could put that up, take action, stop unchecked, sprawling wireless and radiation towers from going up. You are going, if you complete this, you are going to be contacting President Trump, members of Congress, as well as FCC officials, so that they hear and that they know we do not support this. They need to get thousands of emails and phone calls about this now. If you are on CHD's email list, you will be getting this within a couple of hours at some point. today. If you are not on our email list, get on our email list, because this is how you take action. This is how we make a difference. One of the things that works in DC is phones ringing off the hook, our email inboxes that get blown up. It's not the only thing. It's not the only strategy, but it's a very, very important part of this. And we need to take action. We all need to be a part of this. Risa, is there anything else that you'd like to add into this, or anything else that our viewers right now need to know in regards to this action and in regards to what they need to do?
I think just that, we need to work together and sort of target every part of government. We need to be, reaching out to the FCC, to Congress, and also, through this petition, we've involved the judicial branch, because this is a huge problem. We're all affected by it, and so I think we need to reach out to everyone who can help us with it.
And I just want to add, you know how you really could help us? Donate to Children's Health Defense. This year in 2026, we very deliberately put a good amount of resources into our EMR and wireless harms program, because it's necessary, because what is happening and what is mobilizing, regardless of political party, is trying to take away our rights. So please support Children's Health Defense. Please donate what you can, because we are at the forefront of this advocacy and of these actions. I don't know what we would do without us and without your department, without the amazing, just brilliant work that everyone is doing in our EMR and wireless harms department. Scott, McCollough, Risa, thank you both so much for joining us. I'm sure we're going to have you back. I'm sure there's going to be updates, likely quite soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you both so much. Everybody, please take action. The link is in the show notes for where you can take action. Be on CHD emails list. I'm going to be a little nerdy about this. So when you get on CHD email list, there are different things you could be on. You could just get Defender, you get CHD TV. You need to get the action alerts too. Some people unclick that. Don't unclick that. I know it's a lot. But we make it easy for you. We make it one click. We hand it over to you. Don't opt out of the actions. Please, as the director of advocacy, I'm asking you, please do me a favor. Don't opt out of the actions. It is so, so incredibly important. Okay, don't go anywhere, because now we have emergency. There's an Ebola outbreak in Africa. A lot of headlines on this, and we know the fear-mongering comes out. We know the agendas come out. If there was one person on the planet that I would want to know her opinion of what is really going on, it is Dr. Meryl Nass, and we have her now.
Thank you so much, Michael. So today, instead of doing a farm show, I thought I would talk about hantavirus and Ebola virus and how they may affect the United States, and really try to tell you everything possible that I thought Americans would be interested in. So I produced a slideshow of 20 slides, and if we could bring them up, I will just get started. And there will also be an opportunity for people who are watching to ask questions, and at the end, I will try to answer them. So thank you. So both Ebola and hantaviruses are RNA viruses like COVID, and they are in a class called viral. They could cause diseases that are called viral hemorrhagic fevers. And these are very serious infections, but they're extraordinarily rare in the United States. Hantavirus is that class of viruses is the only one I know that actually exists in the United States. The rest are only overseas. The mortality rates could be very high, 25 to 70%, particularly if there is no tertiary high-quality hospital care available. But in the United States, we only count 30 hantavirus infections in the whole country per year, and almost all of them are in the West. And so we did have a death from hantavirus in Maine a few years ago, but that's extraordinarily rare, and 1 per 10 million Americans per year. So not something you need to worry about. None of the hantaviruses in the US causes an infection that is known to spread between people. So as far as we know, no one has ever caught a hantavirus in the US from somebody else. Next slide. The one hanta that spreads between people that we know of is the Andes hantavirus, which is only found in Chile and Argentina. Yes, thanks. Go back to that slide, please. Other viral hemorrhagic fevers viruses include Ebola, Hanta, Marburg, Lassa, Machupo, Congo Crimean, Rift Valley fever, yellow fever, Nipah, and other viruses. So there are a bunch of them, but again, all of them are rare. You get them initially from contact with an animal. Either the animal bites you or you are in contact with their droppings or something similar. The treatment for almost all of them is basically to try to keep the person alive with IV fluids, maybe a ventilator, maybe something called ECMO, which takes the place of your lungs, and give you the intensive care you need until your body has fought off the virus. And then most people will survive. You may recall that apart from the 2 nurses in Texas who caught Ebola from the very first Ebola patient who showed up before anyone knew that he had it, they caught it from him, but no one else caught Ebola from any other Ebola cases in the United States. So if you use sufficient, appropriate barrier protections, your mucous membranes are covered, your eyes, your nose, your mouth are covered, you know, your whole body is covered, so you don't get anything on your hands, and you take the gear off properly, often with someone watching you to make sure you do it correctly, and so you don't contaminate yourself in the process, you know, you will be fine. And that, so no other doctors or nurses have caught it. Next slide. Well, on top of the Hanta, we've got this new Ebola outbreak. Now, there have been about 25 total Ebola outbreaks in Africa since it was first discovered 50 years ago in 1976. In this one, it's thought that there are about 400 people affected and 118 dead, but most of them have not been tested, so we don't know for sure that all of those cases are Ebola. As I said, it spreads through body fluids, so touching, if you get some on your hand or another part of your body, which then contacts your mucous membrane, that is how you spread the disease to a human. It does not spread through indoor air like COVID, although if somebody sneezes on you or coughs on you and you're directly there without barrier protections, you can catch it from that. Most of these Ebola outbreaks actually died off on their own. So there often was not much medical care by the time they were discovered, and yet either people figured out how to avoid cases or they mutated and they just disappeared. And then they'll spring up somewhere else a few years later. Next slide. So, as I said, Ebola was first discovered in 1976. These are all the places it has originated. The only 2 large epidemics were in West Africa and in East Congo, which is very close to where the current outbreak is found. And those are the only 2 where there were over 1,000 cases. So all these other outbreaks were only a few cases to a few hundred cases. Next slide. Currently, in this Ebola epidemic in Africa, there's a town in the northeastern Congo called Bunia, and there's a hospital there, and there were medical missionaries. And so an American physician missionary, his physician wife, another American physician, and 4 children of the first couple were thought to all have been exposed, and the husband is sick. And they have all been evacuated to Germany. It is interesting that we haven't been told where they went, indicating that, again, the government is playing games with the public. It's a question of not wanting to scare people. Of course, if they didn't want to scare people, why would they reveal all this information about Ebola and Hanta in the media all the time? But they haven't told us whether they're using an American military base. They have a very high-tech hospital in Germany at Landstuhl, which dealt with people with Gulf War syndrome and trauma, physical trauma, IEDs and such, and vaccine injuries from soldiers who were deployed to the Middle East. And so this hospital is of high quality, but also Germany has studied pandemics and biological warfare agents, and they also have some high quality hospitals that can handle these patients. Anyway, don't know why there is so much secrecy about both the Ebola and the Hanta patients. Next slide. So moving to Hanta, even though the Andes strain is contagious human to human, it's not very contagious. So of 3,000 cases that were identified in a study of cases that was published, only 10% were due to transmission from person to person, and the other 90% were due to direct contact with rodents or their droppings. And even people in the same family, they tended not to get exposed, and husbands and wives, there was only about a 30% chance of catching the disease from your infected partner. Now, it's said that there are no treatments for this form of Ebola, no vaccines, no nothing. But is that really true? It's uncertain. Next slide. So here's a paper that was published 5 years ago. It was written by scientists in Belgium, but it was reviewed and edited by Connie Schmaljohn, who used to work at Fort Detrick and then was transferred over to Fauci's NIAID. And it was also reviewed by Rebecca Brocato, who is still at Fort Detrick. So we know that the U.S. defense, biodefense system is well aware that in animal studies, chloroquine prevented Hanta infection in newborn mouse pups when it had been given to their mother before they were born, so that they got it through the placenta. And then after they were born, they were injected with hantavirus, and 75% of them survived. So they're mice, they're not people, but instead of saying there is no treatment, well, there may be a treatment, particularly because it's important to note that the incubation period for both Hanta and Ebola can be quite long. So for Ebola, it can be up to 3 weeks, and for Hanta, it can be up to 6 weeks. And so during that incubation period, you could potentially give a very safe drug, chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, to people who have been exposed, and that is likely to prevent them from coming down with clinical disease. Even if it doesn't work, it's a safe drug as long as you give it in the right dose. And this is clearly what we should be doing, but we have been told nothing by the CDC or other branches of government about how people who are being quarantined for Hanta are being treated. We have about 16 people in a quarantine unit at the University of Nebraska, and there are over 40 Americans being monitored altogether in the United States who may have been exposed to hantavirus. Next slide. Let me go back historically to the role of the World Health Organization in the two largest Ebola epidemics. The World Health Organization took a hands-off approach to the largest Ebola epidemic ever in 2014 in 3 countries in West Africa, primarily. And as Reuters reported, global health experts accused the WHO of egregious failure. They just didn't want to get involved, and it took 9 months before they declared a public health emergency of international concern. Next slide. The WHO did not learn from that experience, and in the 2018 to 2020 second largest Ebola epidemic in the Congo, the WHO took 11 months to declare it a public health emergency of international concern. They did deploy experimental vaccines that had been were approved in the United States around that same time, and yet they had a mortality rate of 66% of cases, which is huge, even higher than the 2014 mortality rate. And instead of rapidly deploying medicines and vaccines and focusing on healthcare, apparently the focus was on keeping people confined within an area so that people who may have been exposed couldn't get out and potentially expose other people. Next slide. So yes, Frontline even did a documentary about this. I mean, this is not my opinion. Everyone who looked at the situation agreed that the WHO failures were egregious and unexplained, and no one ever apologized. Next slide. Even the Lancet admitted that the WHO completely handled these Ebola epidemics terribly. So it was acknowledged in the earlier one in West Africa, they did poorly, and yet in the later one in Congo, the same fundamental mistakes were made. A lot of money was donated, money was invested, but a lot of the money went to global surveillance and response systems, so they were trialing systems that could be used later if there were epidemics in other countries, like developed countries. But I'm quoting the Lancet, little attention was given to standards of care, how to treat the patients, and the effects of the outbreak on families, communities, and health workers. The Ebola outbreak response was securitized and politicized. A security-based approach, in other words, policing the people and making them stay in one place, which is not how public health is normally conducted. So demanding compliance and punishing people if they didn't comply, these are considered contrary to public health. Next slide. So, I mean, given all this, should the WHO be trusted to provide advice and to manage either the current Ebola or the current hantavirus outbreak? Well, even though it took the WHO nearly a year to call either of those two biggest Ebola outbreaks a public health emergency of international concern, it turns out that they've already designated the hantavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. And the WHO is having a meeting today and will probably designate the Ebola outbreak in the same way. So why is it happening differently? Well, I would suggest that it may have something to do with the fact that yesterday, the weekly meeting of the members of the World Health Organization began. So the nations, 192 nations who are members of the WHO sent their delegates to Geneva for this important yearly meeting. And in fact, one of the issues is trying to push forward a pandemic treaty. You may remember I did a lot of work on this and gave many CHD TV shows, about 20 shows on this subject. The WHO wanted to be able to declare pandemics of any kind, even a health pandemic or a gun pandemic or a climate change pandemic. I'm just calling them pandemics, but health emergencies. They wanted to be able to declare health emergencies at any time and then get the right to tell nations, to demand that nations obey what they had to say. Of course, they don't have a track record. Their track record is poor, but they wanted that power anyway. If we could get back to that slide, please. And therefore, what is being handled at this meeting, the most important thing for the WHO is trying to get the pandemic treaty accepted. Particularly, the biggest sticking point is the pathogen access and benefit sharing system. And this was a plan in which all the nations would be told to go out, find, and share their deadly pathogens with the World Health Organization, which would have a lending library of pathogens and would share them widely with labs around the world, universities, pharmaceutical companies, research centers, and then, at least in one draft of the pandemic treaty, those entities would be allowed to share these pathogens with whomever they liked. And in fact, the WHO already has an agreement with a maximal high containment laboratory in Spiez, Switzerland, to maintain the pathogens that have already been given to the WHO or which it has collected, and there are scientists there to study them. So this process has already begun, even though the nations have not agreed with it. The problem is no one's going to be, if you start sharing these pathogens widely, no one will be accountable for lab accidents or transfers. You won't know where an outbreak started. You won't know who had the lab leak if you ship them out to 100 or 200 or 1,000 entities. And so one wonders, at least you have to ponder whether the tremendous publicity about the very small hantavirus outbreak and the moderate-sized Ebola outbreak that have consumed the news feed all the last week, whether they have anything to do with trying to help push this WHO agenda forward. Next slide. The WHO asked the McKinsey consulting company to figure out how much it would cost to have a global pandemic preparedness and response program. And McKinsey estimated to set it up would cost $85 to $130 billion during 2 years, and then $20 to $50 billion yearly. And the WHO wanted to collect that much money from member states and donors. Now, that would increase the budget of the WHO by a factor of 10, which means right now their budget is about $2 billion a year. Well, they would like a budget of $20 billion a year, or even 50. So the WHO, you can imagine, is very hungry to implement a biodefense agenda, biosecurity, pandemic preparedness, and planning and response. They want this. And will they get it? They don't have the experts there who know what they're doing. They rely on outside experts, and many of them are donated to the WHO by the Gates Foundation, and they are giving you what Bill Gates wants, or what the Wellcome Trust wants, or what the pharmaceutical industry wants. Next slide. Okay, so what about the United States? Are they going to actually now encourage trust in public health by freely sharing information, or will the government withhold information and maybe treatments, as happened with COVID? Well, we know that Fort Detrick has been studying hantaviruses and Ebola viruses and other hemorrhagic fever viruses for at least 50 years. It makes sense that they would have collected stored anti-sera from people who survived. And we know there are people who have survived these infections, even in the United States, not this form of Ebola, but it would be within what the US government and Fort Detrick normally do, is to try to collect these samples. Now, if you have anti-sera, you can often use that to identify particular antibodies that are very protective, and you can develop a monoclonal antibody or several monoclonal antibodies from your anti-sera. And you may also have studied, remember, as was done for COVID and has been done for other infections, you study the structure of drugs that are already approved and find out whether any of them have a structure that looks like they will inhibit the viruses that are of concern. And in this case, we know that Hanta and Ebola have been of concern. And so it makes sense that the US government has already done studies looking at repurposed drugs, but we have heard nothing about this so far. Next slide. So, of course, viral hemorrhagic fevers have been considered potential agents of biological warfare. The U.S., since 2001, has spent between $5 and $28 billion a year on its biowarfare and pandemic response. There has always been concern that the research could lead to lab leaks, and there are lab leaks. And there has been concern that a scientist, an evil scientist or a bought scientist could steal the agents he's working on or the agents his colleagues are working on, and even release them or sell them to another entity. I actually consulted for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence 18 years ago in a program to try and identify ways of finding out whether there might be domestic terrorist scientists and how to prevent them from accessing dangerous biological agents or sharing them. Next slide. As you know, it's always been said it's a question of if not when. Of course, that the powers that be are trying to make Americans think that it's always a question of if not when, but that's not necessarily true. In the 1900s, all we had were some flu epidemics and nothing like what we see now, which seems to be in part a function of the money we're putting into biodefense. Next slide. So when well, this got messed up, but anyway, what I want to say is that you always have accidents and escapes when you're studying deadly organisms. You can't do biodefense research without the possibility. I mean, it's the offense is right next to the defense. You're always going to be just one or two steps away from having offensive bio research when you're doing defensive work. So that has to be kept in mind. Next slide. And here's the example. Every year there is a report of the Federal Select Agent Program in which about 20 dangerous pathogens, both dangerous to humans, dangerous to plants, or dangerous to livestock, have been designated by USDA and CDC, and they collect information on lab transfers and lab accidents. There are 200 lab accidents a year that get reported within the United States alone. Just imagine how much there is everywhere else. In 2018, 895 people who worked in labs, and maybe their families, had to be checked out medically because of a potential exposure. Next slide. And to make the point that, yes, the US government is aware, and other governments are aware of these viruses and are aware of how they may spread. And in fact, they have done the experiments to test spreading these viruses through new animals, through new sources of transmission. So here you have government scientists, Canadian government scientists, and university scientists taking this current Ebola virus, the Bundibugyo virus, and putting it into domestic pigs and showing that the pigs shed it and can spread it to other pigs. Now, okay, this is science. It was done 2 years ago, published 2 years ago. But, and the pigs were asymptomatic, but were still able to shed the virus and presumably to human caregivers. So we know that our own governments have mechanisms by which these things can be spread. Okay, is that the last slide, I think? So I'd like to answer any questions. That's the last, isn't it? So isn't there an Ebola virus outbreak every year in Africa? There's been about 25 over 50 years, so approximately every 2 years. Yes. And we can tell by studying the genome of these viruses whether they're likely to have been manipulated in a lab. And that may be one reason why we have not been given the genetic sequence of either of these viruses yet. And we should have. So the hantavirus was published a sequence was published on a database, but who runs that database? Christian Anderson and Andrew Rambo, both of whom were authors of the Proximal Origin paper, which was designed by themselves and Fauci to make everybody think this couldn't possibly be a lab. COVID couldn't possibly be a lab leak. And so we know they are liars. So the only place that the sequence was published was by them. So it's not really trustworthy at this point. Will one of the BSL-4 scientists try to smuggle a vial of this into the United States? Well, unfortunately, historically, scientists just, it wasn't called smuggling. They didn't think it was smuggling. They just carried viruses on airplanes. And they didn't spread any on airplanes, but they did bring viruses back and forth to other countries and share them with their colleagues. And this was routine. It is now illegal, but Vincent Munster, who worked for the NIH at the Rocky Mountain Lab in Hamilton, Montana, may not have been aware of that, or he thought he wasn't going to get caught. And so, yes, he smuggled live viruses, we think live, into the United States. And, will the government, that actually happened months ago. It only just now made the news. We need to know what's going on. We haven't had any further updates. So again, the information is being withheld. Question, in Western states, should we have particular treatment in your medicine cabinet for prevention? Well, since no hantaviruses in the United States transmit person to person, you would have to get it directly from mouse droppings or rat droppings or a bite of a rodent. And in that case, if that happened to you, yeah, I would try to get some hydroxychloroquine to take. I would do it through a doctor because too much can be deadly. You want to get the right amount. Why not? Even though we don't know whether it's going to work in humans, it did work in rodents. Hopefully, if you talk, it's hard to, a lot of us are cleaning up mouse drop. I cleaned up mouse droppings last week in my garage. The hantavirus in mouse droppings is only contagious for a few days, a week or less. So if it's old mouse droppings, don't worry about it. But if you see fresh urine from a mouse, let it go for at least a week before you clean it up. Are lab leak reports posted somewhere to alert the public? No, they're not. They publish a yearly report which condenses things. They don't want you to know which labs had the leaks. It's a very whitewashed report, but it does tell you, how many thefts they believe happened, how many losses, and how many leaks there were. Anything else? If chloroquine works, then quinine should work, which I believe comes from a plant. Yes, it comes from the bark of the cinchona tree. Again, quinine can be toxic too if you take too much. You can buy quinine syrup, tonic water contains quinine. But it's best if you get it from a doctor. And because only 1 in 30 million Americans per year is going to come down with hantavirus, it's probably something you don't have to worry about. Anything else? That seems to be all the questions. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, my name is Sarah Steele.
And this is a story about going back to when you were 16.
Yes.
All right, so why did you decide to even get the hepatitis B?
Well, they were passing around a paper in school, and it was talking about this vaccine that was coming out and how if you were to even share a cup with someone in college, you know, if you're at a party or whatever, then you could contract this disease and how dangerous it was. And I thought, well, I'm going to college and I'll probably end up sharing a cup with someone at some point. So I decided to go home and tell my parents about this shot that I needed to take. And they were hesitant, but they're like, well, it sounds like you've done your research, so we're going to trust you and we're going to let you get the shot. So I went and I had the first round of the shot, and I got these strange, painful lumps in the back of my arms. And so my parents said, well, you should probably go to the school nurse and tell her what happened. So I did. And she said, well, you only got the shot in one arm, right? And I said, yes. And she said, then you shouldn't have lumps in both arms. So I believed her. So I had the second round of the Hep B, which there's 3 rounds. And I got painful lumps in my arms and my legs. And my parents said, we have no idea what this is, but you're not getting the 3rd round. So then we started to go to, first we went to our pediatrician. And my mom explained to her they're very painful. So she looked at me and she said, poke, and poked one. And of course they were extremely painful, so tears shot to my eyes. And my mom is holding herself back from punching the doctor and was like, why did you do that? I told you they were painful. And she said, well, I just needed to make sure. So we went from doctor to doctor for the next 6 months, seeing specialists, having chest x-rays. I had one biopsied, and finally after having a biopsy, well, previous to that, one of the tests, they said if it comes back positive, you may have 6 months to live. Keep in mind I'm 16. So my life is kind of flashing before my eyes at this point. So they cut one out of me. And that's when we got the diagnosis of erythema nodosum, which has no cure.
Really slowly?
Erythema nodosum. It means hot lumps under the skin, hot nodules under the skin. So it's a hardening of the subcutaneous fatty layer of the skin. It's kind of like a tiny ping pong ball under your skin. So it's between the fat and the muscle. And as that fat hardens, it creates this little ball that's really painful. Now on the top, it's red. That's where the thema in erythema comes from, is the hot redness on top. And so you get these red, bruisey looking bumps on your body. I've had up to 80 of them on my body at one time. And any movement, whether pressure from the top or muscle movement from underneath, causes pain. So the only way to not be in pain is to not move. And so that's where I was for the past 27 years. Now the only cure, which isn't really a cure, is to take prednisone nonstop in a high enough dosage that they have to test your blood once a month so that you don't get liver failure, and then have your eyes checked every 6 months for blindness for the medications that you're on.
This is terrible.
Yeah. So when I found out I was pregnant with my first son, I called my doctor because he said that prednisone stops rapidly dividing cells. Well, that's what a baby is. And so I said, well, since I'm pregnant, I should probably get off this medicine, right? He said yes. So they weaned me off the medicine, and he said, you can't take it while you're pregnant or nursing back then. Now they'll put you on prednisone while you're pregnant and nursing. So I decided at that point, since I can't take any of the prescription medication, I'm just gonna have to look elsewhere. And so I spent the next 18 years, because this is 2006 and my son will be 18 this year, looking for solutions. And so I learned about detoxing my body and the foods that I ate and all of those things in order to try and help myself recover from this vaccine injury that they said there is no cure.
Did you vaccinate your child?
No.
He said nothing?
Nothing.
How is he?
I have 7 unvaccinated children.
You have 7 children?
I have had zero ear infections, 0 children on antibiotics, with one exception being my first because I didn't know any better. They're all perfectly healthy. 6 of the 7 have never been to a traditional doctor.
That's incredible.
Yes.
So as awful as it is, your Hep B injury, look at your children.
Yes.
You had to do that to
Yes.
be able to give them the
I didn't
help.
want them to have it. Yeah, I did not.
It's still really sad you were 16 years old. You must have been petrified.
Yeah, it was really scary and painful, and I took steroids before I went to prom so that I could dance and not be in pain. But I knew that if I took the steroids, then the next time the lumps came back, they'd be worse than the first time.
So well, how about today? How's your body today?
I was healed a week and a half ago. And a friend of mine has what I refer to as her magical machine. And I have had 2 sessions with her machine, and my lumps went away a week and a half ago, and it has really been life-changing. I've not had no pain in 27 years. And so it's been wonderful the past week and a half.
Machine? What is that?
It puts frequency into your body, and it tests you for over 400,000 things. And as it's testing you, whenever your body responds to something, the machine then puts that frequency of that thing into you, whether it's a parasite or a negative emotion or whatever it is. And then, at the end of your session, which lasts about 3 hours, she has a long list of all the frequencies that it has put into your body. And then she sends that off to a company where they put it into water, and you drink the water for 2 weeks.
Never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
But of course, we're not giving out medical advice.
No, we're not. That's just
what this lady
coincidental,
has to be
you know.
So anything else you want to say about this story?
I would say do your research, because those of us who are injured do not make a penny by sharing our story. I've not been paid to share my story. I did it voluntarily, and the only reason I'm doing it is to help you make better decisions for you and your kids, because you don't know, and there's no way to know if you are going to be a person who responds negatively to any of these procedures, vaccines, whatever it is, and that there's not much hope for you from the people who give them to you. And so you're very much on your own. It's a very lonely place to be. So when those of us who are not getting paid by any of these companies are speaking out, I would encourage you to listen to us, because we're doing it to help you, because we've been on the other side of it.
We're warning you.
Yeah, we're warning you. Yeah, please don't. There are better ways.
Thank you so much. Can't believe I've got 7. Wow.
And then
the incredible service members, and we owe you our freedom.
The Pentagon is going to require vaccines for all service members.
I'm asking the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID-19 to the list of vaccinations our armed forces must get.
Leaders did everything legal or illegal within their power to coerce and influence their service members to get the shot.
Her son and 9 other Marines were being held in confinement in the brig until they got vaccinated.
If you don't do what they tell you to do, they will ostracize you. They will destroy your life.
8,000 well-trained men and women were fired.
I lost my ability to feed my family.
I mean, I'm being told you're getting dishonorably discharged.
You cannot mandate an experimental medical product on military members.
The impact is really on the entire nation.
I had a battalion commander come to me, and she said, "Dear God, we're killing our own soldiers."
When we talk about orders that are unlawful, now there is a duty to disobey.
.46% of the American people say mandates are dangerous, they're damaging, and vaccine science isn't settled.
The steady decline of childhood vaccine rates. Vaccination rates continued to decline last year.
There's a discourse about vaccines that didn't exist before.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense.
Children's Health Defense is the leader in the health freedom movement.
The Department of Health and Human Services is overhauling the immunization schedule, now only recommending 11.
We are making recommendations that are science-based, that are common sense.
Secretary Hegseth discarding the mandatory flu vaccine requirement.
Your body, your faith, and your convictions are not negotiable.
People recognize you have to be able to make an individualized decision.
For the first time, the U.S. FDA will acknowledge that COVID-19 vaccines killed American children.
States are putting in place medical freedom laws. There's bills in Congress that Children's Health Defense is supporting, the GRACE Act for the right to religious exemptions, the End the Vaccine Carve-Out, ending liability protection, and Tom Massey's bill to repeal the PrEP Act.
One of the most aggressive medical accountability lawsuits in decades.
Suing the American Academy of Pediatrics.
CHD is suing under RICO laws, claiming that the AAP operates as a criminal enterprise and has for decades.
A federal judge yesterday blocked Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s recent overhaul of the nation's childhood vaccine schedule.
They basically just froze all vaccine policy.
The American Academy of Pediatrics and other medical groups filed a lawsuit arguing the vaccine changes violated federal law.
Which is outrageous for a single judge sitting in Boston to stop any work at the Centers for Disease Control related to vaccines.
This conflict between medical freedom and medical coercion, it's a fundamental conflict that we must resolve now in favor of medical freedom or forever be truly slaves to medical tyranny.
I am so glad that there are people like you who are still fighting this.
Children's Health Defense, if you don't know what they do, folks, look it up.
We have got to, as a society, global, decide, is medical coercion okay, or do you have a right to decide what happens to your body?
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.